Hi, everybody. Jeffrey Byard here, and we're going to talk about breaking down this core of toxic shame that many of us have. And we're going to do that by reading the Daily Reflection of ACA, and we're going to discuss it a little bit. Today is May 27th, where I am. I'm just going to jump right in. You can see the reading on the screen. The title is Self Forgiveness, and here we go. Let's read it together. Self-forgiveness is an elusive concept for adult children. We ask that the adult child keep an open mind and consider that God has already forgiven the person. And this is from the Big Red Book, BRB, page 113. Forgiving others was tough enough, but for some of us, forgiving ourselves seemed a monumental task. We carried the shame and guilt passed down from generation to generation, from one hurt person to the next, in a chain for maybe hundreds of years. We may have found that we needed to act compulsively to stay numb to the pain. Maybe we chose drugs, alcohol, food, gambling, approval, cutting, video games, power, rules, or spending. We lived in fear because deep down we thought we were unlovable. Sound familiar? It does for me. I'm going to pause there for a moment and briefly comment on my own experience, strength, and hope related to this section of the reading. I come from a long line of really, really sick people. And it's a generational disease, family dysfunction. It gets passed down from one generation to the next. They pass on the trademark, toxic shame, the guilt, the self-loathing, the hate, the doubt, the excessive worry, and the fear, the constant chronic anxiety. All of those things get passed right down to the next generation. And mine goes way back. I've done a little bit of genealogy, family history studies, and I have discovered people in the family. There's all kinds of sickness going on. But from my own childhood, I remember psychically numbing the pain with escapism, with fantasy. My older brother, for example, was one who had a lot of hatred himself, and he was able to pass that on to me. He was quite an influential person in my life, and so he passed a lot of his hobbies that he learned to psychically numb out onto me. Escape into heavy metal music, Dungeons and Dragons, a role playing game. All of these things were ways to just escape what was going on in the house from sick people who could not get along, possibly two narcissistic parents. I know at least one of them is or was. And all of the fighting and the violence, the alcoholism, the constant shaming attacks, all of that. I needed a way to get away, to escape from it, to just check out from reality and to not have to feel that. And I used a lot of these things. The cutting, I wasn't ever a cutter necessarily, but video games, absolutely. I was addicted to them. Rules, scrupulosity, being afraid of making a mistake because I was breaking some moral rule or something like that. The self-approval, self-seeking, wanted to be the center of attention, people liking me. And then, of course, ultimately, this led to alcohol and drugs. Later on down the road, I'll get to that in some other video. But I thought I was a mistake, and I think that's one of the most important things to bear in mind here is what is this idea of shame? And I'm going to put it on the screen here for you. You can see right here. This is mostly referring to toxic shame, mind you, and this toxic shame. It says here, it's an intense sense of being faulty, wrong, or inferior at the core of our being. We can feel this in our guts. A feeling of being ruptured, a burning feeling in the stomach, a sensation of the body shrinking, spiraling inward in the stomach or chest or both, constricted throat, difficulty in speaking, heaviness on the chest and difficulty breathing, feeling glared at by others. That last one is huge. How many of us have gone out into public and feel everybody staring at us, or we know what they're thinking, they're saying something bad, they're plotting against us? That's shame. That's a shame-based existence. That's that overflowing reservoir of toxic shame that many adult children have. And that our goal here is to break that up, to bust it up to pieces and get rid of it. It's going to take time. But I'm getting this from the Big Red Book, this section right here. And by the way, just to briefly show you where this is, page 131, it says our reading is from page 113, from page 113 in the Big Red Book. And this is the context here on the screen. You can see where this comes from. So yeah, and then right after that it says, if we have self-forgiveness, we can learn to protect our emerging inner child or true self. Now that's another thing that's going to be important. I'm going to get to that in a moment, but let's continue the reading here with what we have today with our daily reflection. Let's move on to the next section. It says this. In ACA, we learn that we can have a relationship with the healing higher power that we can define in any way we want. Crucial point there. If our families were abusive and perfectionistic, we no longer bow down to them. We reject the feelings of despair and hopelessness because they are no longer belong to us. Now, this concept of a higher power is crucial. Now, there are a lot of other people out there, including my own family members, who profess a certain type of religion or faith. They follow that, and that's the only way for them. Fortunately, thank goodness, thank HP for 12-step recovery, we can believe in any kind of higher power we want. It doesn't matter. It's our own conception. It can be nature. It can be the strong nuclear force that keeps atoms together. Something that's usually it's something that that is a power greater than ourselves, such as a group, an ACA group, but has some will possibly as well. This is a very, very liberating concept because it doesn't keep us confined to religion. Recovery, ACA recovery is not about religion. It is a spiritual-based program. And thank goodness for that because it is all inclusive. So that's important to remember. You do not need to believe in God even. It is a power greater than ourselves that can help us overcome this lack of self-love. Okay? That's what we're getting towards, is dealing with this love deficit many of us have. So let's move on to this next part. As we begin to forgive ourselves for real or imagined wrongs, we become ready to reparent our inner child. In doing so, we make room for a new outlook, one that allows us to believe that part of us is already whole and sane, the united self, the whole self, already with our higher power and already forgiven. Intrinsically, that concept of God being there, telling us that we're already whole because we have this original being, this inner child in us that is already constructed wholly and with love and grace and dignity. As we continue to heal, we will come to understand that we were forgiven all along. Now, just briefly, it's important to define some terms. Again, from the Big Red Book, an inner child, just a brief review of key terms from the book itself, the ACA BRB or Big Red Book. The inner child here, number one, you can see from on the screen, the inner child here being the original person, being, or force, which we truly are. Some ACA members call this the true self. And if we scroll down a little past the loving parent section, we do have quite a bit of information on the inner child, as you can see on the screen here from the book. First, before we get into that inner child stuff, we do need to establish a loving parent. There is kind of an order how things flow here in the program, but I'm not going to get into too much of the inner child information. I don't want to overload you with that today. I just want to focus on the reading. So, beginning to forgive ourselves for real or imagined wrongs. The stuff that was going on in my family growing up was my parents' inability to love themselves passed on to me. It was their self-hate, their fear, their anxiety, their destructive patterns passed on to me that they got from their family, from their parents. My father was a sick man. He was potentially alcoholic, but never admitted to it. My mother was not one who drank, but she had all the isms, the para-alcoholism, the possibly the narcissistic tendencies as well. All of that was passed on to her from her mother. My grandmother, extremely matriarchal, controlled my grandfather, ran the show, didn't really wear the pants per se as far as monetarily, financially bringing home the bacon, but she was in control. She was not a drinker. She had all the fear, the anxiety, the worry, the self-hate passed on to her from her mother, possibly her father. I didn't know her mom and dad. I didn't know my great-grandparents, but all that comes from them. It's a generational disease passed all the way down. So ultimately, coming from my great-grandparents somewhere, that my great-great-grandparents and possibly my third great-grandparents, all the way back, hundreds of years we're talking here, guys. Hundreds of years. This package, this toxic shame was passed down from one generation to the next. And I stood before my mother and father and I was ready to receive. But I don't have to take the package anymore. I don't have to take the toxic shame. I can push it out. I can work on it with daily reflections, with recovery work, connecting with you guys, with other members of the recovery community, and other fellow travelers and adult children. We can share experience, strength, and hope. I'm already forgiven, and that's one of the important parts of the reading as well. I'm already whole inside. The inner child, that connection, that channel. The inner child is the connection to the higher power. It's the channel, the conduit that allows me to connect to an HP, not intellectually, but spiritually, through the heart. There's that old saying that there's that the biggest drop is from the mind to the heart, right? That 18 inches or whatever the saying goes. There's that huge drop. I can intellectualize if the false self is in operation. I can intellectualize an HP. But if I'm really connected with my inner child, my true self, the authentic self, then I'm connecting with the higher power through heart, through love, not through intellect. And this is where the false self tries to get me to believe in certain ideas of higher power or God or whatnot. But the inner child knows. The inner child knows. The inner child is a conduit. So if the inner child is already in there, I'm already whole. I'm already forgiven by my higher power. And the most important part here at the very end, it tells me, on this day, I will hold my head high and act as if I am forgiven, even if I don't yet fully believe it. And that is so vital, isn't it? How many of us walk around with the head down because we know what they're thinking about us? We know that's that shame, right? What does it say in our little blurb over here about shame from the Big Red Book? It says, look, feeling glared at by others. I know what they're thinking about me. I know they're plotting against me. They're conspiring. They're talking bad. Look, I know they think my nose is ugly, my face, my teeth, whatever it might be. They're saying something bad. That's that core shame, a shame-based existence that many of us have. And so today I will walk with my head high and know I'm already forgiven, even if I don't fully feel it. Thanks for being here, everybody. This is Healing from Shame with Jeffrey Byard, your host. And I'm so grateful that we're here together. We'll see you.